for a theme-based approach to full week faith. Sarah Gibmillspaw and I had been talking about an offering for GREs, and so when we put our heads together this fall, this seemed like a no-brainer. It's such a great idea. You may or may not know this, but it came from humble Unitarian beginnings. It's interesting stuff. So I hope you will enjoy it and find some tools to use in your context. So our presenters here this evening, you can see them. I am one of them. I'm your youth ministry specialist for the Pacific Western region. I served as a DRE at First Unitarian Denver for 6 years. Prior to this position, and have done a lot of youth work in the interim, soccer coaching, high school teaching, youth advising, chaplaincy, camp directing, you name it. If there are youth involved, I've probably done it, short of driving the bus. And Sarah introduced herself just a bit earlier. She is our faith formation specialist, but also a generalist on our Pacific Western region staff. Speaking of the Pacific Western region, I want to talk a little bit about, let's shrink that down. There we go. What our vision kind of is about. And as a staff team, we, a couple of years ago, came together and kind of looked at the lay of the land and talked a little bit about some shift statements that we'd like to focus on in the work that we do as congregational life support. And these three shifts are from I to we, from independence to interdependence, from fear to faith, meaning embracing religious practice, ritual, and language, which is something that in some UU contexts we've had our troubles with. And then a shift from no to yes. From scarcity thinking to abundance thinking. How can we build on the treasures, time, talent, and treasures that exist as resources in our congregational context? This evening's webinar really focuses on two of these shifts, the I to we, that kind of isolated family approach, the isolated just on Sunday morning RE approach, to something a bit more comprehensive, larger, and interdependent. And then also fear to faith. When we talk about full week faith, we're really talking about living into our values, not just on Sunday morning, but all week long. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get more deeply into the webinar. Speaking of, let's light our chalice. If you have a chalice nearby, I invite you to call forth its blaze, whether it be electric or your regular old candle style. And I'm gonna light our chalice this evening, whether it be virtual or literal, with the words from the Unitarian Assembly of Burundi. When people meet, endless possibilities emerge. New cultural experiences and openness to new ways of understanding and doing things. A special attention to the other and a sense of service beyond self-development. Today, this evening, let us light the chalice for openness, willingness to grow, enriching curiosity, and active cooperation. May it be so. So at this time, I'd love for you to introduce yourself in the chat box. So take a moment, find the chat icon, and then include the name of all the individuals in your group. Some of you I know are individually participating. Others are en masse. What church you're representing and what location. And what have you heard about Full Week Faith, just in a short sentence or phrase. So in the chat box, type in your name, the church location, and what have you heard about full week faith? So, and I may not have mentioned it. I personally am in Denver, Colorado. That's where I do my work, representing the Pacific Western region. I see we have Sarah from Olympia, Washington. We have Kate all the way on the East Coast. Wonderful. Where, Kate, are you on the East Coast? Marcy's joining us from Arizona. UU, uh, congregation in Chandler. Marcy's talking about how it adds a lot of work to her load. And she's hoping to learn a way that maybe isn't so time intensive. And I hope this will be helpful. Kate's in Leesburg, Virginia. Welcome, Kate, all the way from Leesburg. Morgan in Davis, California, with Reverend Morgan McLean, Megan, Jenny, Suzanne, Mayor, Donna, and Matt. Welcome. The entire RE committee's there. Appreciate you joining us. So in all the meetings I run and all the webinars I lead, I commit to religious ritual as an aspect of that work. And I encourage you, when you meet with your RE teams, if you're meeting with your board, if you're meeting with your youth, to intentionally take time to reinforce the religious nature of the activity. And so this evening, to get us centered, to call us into our best selves, to bring us into this moment, we're just going to do a quick 1-minute breathing exercise. So get comfortable where you are. As you are willing and able, close your eyes. And you're going to count down slowly from 10 to 0. With each number, you'll take one complete breath, inhaling and exhaling. For example, as you breathe in, you'll say the number 10 silently in your head, and also the words I am. And then as you breathe out, you will silently say to yourself, at peace. So I am at peace. And again, starting with that number, and you'll count down from 10 to 0. And once you reach 0, I invite you to scan your body and intentionally find areas of tenseness and kind of devote some time and energy to just relaxing those areas. Get comfortable, be present, and then you'll open your eyes. So let's take 1 minute to do that. And if you're watching this in an archived video, you can just skip a minute ahead. All right, here we go. All right, remember after those 10 deep intentional breaths to scan, get loose, get comfortable, open your eyes, and let's begin. So tonight's webinar is an extension of what we refer to as theme-based ministry. Post in the chat box, if you would, if your church is doing theme-based ministry. Go ahead and take a moment and let us know whose church or congregation is participating in this this exercise or this type of ministry. One of the great things about it, and you can go to www.uua.org/re/themes. Sarah, would you type that in the chat box so people can check it out? uua.org/re/themes. The focus is it offers worship experiences with serious attention to depth, ensures a balance of theological and religious learning as well as liturgy. Many would argue that it better integrates spirituality, connecting programming across the lifespan, that it weaves a central thread throughout all church programming, and builds a cohesive theological understanding, where the church strives to find common language, common lexicon and symbols, embracing a practical theology that can be used in everyday life, which really ties it into full week faith, as you'll see in just a moment. It also helps meet the very real challenges of today's busy families and intermittent church attendance. So it allows for church to happen not just on Sunday morning, but full week, and gives a focus not just to the liturgy on one Sunday, but throughout the month, tying in staff efforts towards a concerted whole. When I served as DRE at First Unitarian Denver, we used a theme-based ministry approach, and I wouldn't go back. It was just absolutely fabulous. The ability to explore themes like divinity and salvation and justice and mysticism made for such rich conversations and excitement in picking hymns and music and readings and other things that just connected into this very great and beautiful interwoven whole. And when you go to the site, again, uua.org/themes, it talks about how this approach to ministry can be effective at any size congregation. If you've got 30 members, if you've got 300. And so we talked about theme-based as an opportunity to explore our theology and our spirituality beyond Sunday morning. And this concept bleeds into the concept of full week faith, which I want to give you a little bit of history about. In the introduction, I talked about how this is a UU movement. It began as an incubator, which is, if you haven't heard that expression before, it's taking a good idea and learning with it from the FOS Collaborative, which is the religious education arm of our Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago. And there are 3 of these incubators each year that come out of FOS. And those incubators are designed to address a changing landscape in church life or religious institutions and how we might wrestle with that or take advantage of that change with innovation. One of the things that we notice with that changing landscape is a decrease across the board in church attendance in religious institutions. The spike post-election notwithstanding. And indeed, several churches just in the immediate vicinity of First Unitarian Denver, where I served, closed in my 6-year tenure. We're seeing, in terms of that landscape, increasingly networked individuals, primarily through social media and technology. Those identifying as increasingly less religious, the nuns, NONESs, for example, yet still a yearning for meaning. And so these incubators, and specifically Full Week Faith, were an attempt to seize at this moment of change. And I'll talk a little bit more about its genesis as we delve further. So the vision of Full Week Faith, I want to take directly from its creator, Karen Bellavance Grace. And this comes from a resource, which will be at the end of this webinar, that talks about her entire project and how it's ongoing. She even has a link to a possible app that you can use that she's created. But this quote's directly from Karen. This proposal asks us to carry forward the best of our current religious education programming and to let go of those pieces that are unsustainable or no longer serving our families well. It invites religious professionals to reimagine roles and responsibilities in shared ministry. It dares our congregants to put the living into the living tradition by supporting one another to live as Unitarian Universalists 7 days a week, intentionally and interactively, and not just on Sunday morning. So to draw out of that, I want to kind of talk about 4 things. First, the vision of Full Week Faith is a focus on family ministry. How do we tend to families as the unit of our ministry? Second, it's mission driven. It's identifying and articulating the call of our faith and practicing as a community. Third, it's sustainable. Marcy, you touched on this in your introduction. It doesn't require a ton of effort, money, volunteer hours, or know-how. And then finally, 4, it leverages new technology. We have so many ways now to communicate, to share. Let's use those tools to our advantage and to connect us in ways that we may not have imagined before. So let's talk about the progenitor of Full Week Faith. I interviewed Karen Bellavance Grace just this past week. I was in Boston with Sarah and the other congregational life staff from around the country, and I told her, "Hey, I'm giving a webinar on this idea that you came up with. Tell me a little bit more about how it came to be." And so there's her picture. You can see her there. She's an amazing individual. She serves as a congregational life staff person in our New England region. And I know she has a focus on small congregations amongst her portfolio. She performed or created this incubator, this project of Full Week Faith, as an extension of the FOS Collaborative, which, as I mentioned, is the RE arm of the Meadville Lombard Theological School. That the FOS is led by Dr. Mark Hicks, an amazing human being. Some of you may have had the privilege of meeting him. Other incubators have created things like, oh goodness, what's his curriculum, Sarah? It's a great multicultural curriculum. It's escaping me now, but perhaps if you've heard of it, you can type it in the chat box. It will occur to me by the end of this webinar. But FOS definitely is a laboratory for RE innovation, and it upholds this commitment by commissioning 3 fellows, 3 researchers per year, and supporting the incubation of adaptive, creative ideas and methodologies. Melinda Einender, thank you. Beloved Conversations, that's it. Thank you. Yes, a tremendous program, which came out of the FOS Collaborative. So Karen Bellavance Grace was one of the in the first cohort of FOS fellows. And what you should know is this group of educators, researchers, innovators meets 3 times a year. And in their very first meeting of the very first group of fellows, Karen shared that she really had no idea what she was going to do as her project. And so she's hanging out with the 2 other fellows in Mark's Chicago apartment, and got stuck briefly with the other fellows kind of on what wasn't working in RE, what wasn't working in congregational life, particularly around religious education. And she had this tremendous view from his balcony of the city and the city lights, and this perfect combination of balcony view and of coffee and moderately consumed wine led to an epiphany. What if we totally turned our RE model upside down? Instead of focusing solely on Sunday, what if we engaged with families all week long? And boom, that was the beginning. That was the seed, the germination of the seed of Full Week Faith. So let's talk about it for a second. So the model, basically, or the model as I took it and ran with it, and my work as DRE at First Unitarian Denver, was taking the theme, the monthly theme, and for those of you who may not yet be engaged in theme-based ministry, there are easy ways to clue in, and I again would refer you back to that website, uua.org/re/themes. So pick a theme like divinity, peace, justice. At First Unitarian, we even explored the theme of economy, if you can believe it. And each day has a different activity connected to the theme, a very simple activity. And Saturday is a Sabbath day where an activity isn't sent out to the families. And Sunday, instead of sending out an activity, the way we went about it was taking a message and advertising what is happening at the church service in a blurb, and then also sharing any other events that might interest families. So I want to talk a little bit more, go more in depth about how we took this idea of full week faith and made it our own at First Unitarian. So I think I've shown my bias. I've talked a little bit about how we address the functional unit of religious education was the family. And I know that's a shift for some. Some look at RE and see that as tending children. But at First Unitarian Denver, we addressed RE as with the family as the functional unit. So our family chapels, our RE enterprises, everything was designed to bring families closer together within the family and to connect families with one another in our endeavors. Full week faith seemed like a natural, perfect way to do this. And let me tell you, First Unitarian is an urban church. It's kind of near the slopes. For months at a time, families might miss, for example, 3 months straight for ski season. And so one of the questions we were really concerned about was, how do we stay connected to one another and to our faith when we might not see a family for 3 months during their son's athletic season, where they have games on Sunday, or ski season where they're up on the slopes for months at a time. I would also hold up that our adult RE was called Whole Soul Living. And that was an extension of this theme-based ministry, where our minister would put prompts in the order of service, questions for individuals within the congregation to delve into, not just on Sunday morning, but throughout the week. And attention on the website, the church's website, would also go towards this whole soul living theme. The minister would write articles. Sometimes I would write an article related to the theme of the month. Sermons and RE classes all centered around our monthly theme. And so we wanted to say, okay, we're exploring this as a congregation. We're looking at divinity, for example, as a congregation. How do we explore these themes even more deeply? And how do we teach our folks that being Unitarian Universalist isn't a Sunday-only activity, that it's something that we live into day in and day out? So we looked at this idea of full week faith, and the RE team said, let's try it. Let's try it. Let's prototype. Let's put together a program, and they loved it. The feedback was unanimously joyous about how it played out. The only complaint that I got when we debriefed after a month of trying this full week faith endeavor was that because I was planning it week to week, folks were getting a little bit of short notice about our Friday Faith in Action events. And I'll talk more about that in just a moment. But keep that in your mind. We did have this one little hiccup. And so if you do decide to use this model of full week faith, and again, this is kind of a particular extension of Karen's original idea. And the website for her whole process is shared in our resources. So you can learn more about that should you choose to dig deeper after the webinar. But I recommend planning a month and ahead if you choose to use this particular model. So let's talk about it explicitly. And I'm going to start here, and then I'm going to share a Google Drive document with you in just a moment. But so the model explicitly, let's say that your theme is compassion. And the way we set it up, the RE team and I at First Unitarian Denver, was each Monday, families would receive a blessing to share over dinner. And so the encouragement was that they would sit down with their family, maybe even light a chalice, and read this blessing aloud, related to the theme of compassion. Okay? And that blank where you see prompt, I didn't have space to put all that information in there. You'll see the specific example shortly. Tuesday, they would get a prayer to share as a family before bed. Again, related to the theme of compassion. Wednesday, a meditation to share after school and work. When the family got together, stressful day, let's sit down and meditate for a second, just for a minute or two, like we did tonight. And just take the edge off school, work, swim practice, whatever it may be. Thursday, a story would be shared related to the theme that could be told at bedtime, that could be told over dinner, that could be told as folks are hanging out, around the porch or the back patio. And then Friday, this is that hiccup. I would do some research and find a faith in action event that was going on. Maybe it's a protest related to our post-election situation, which is weighing heavily on our hearts. Or maybe it was an educator or a faith leader coming to speak in the area, or an interfaith event, partnering with our Muslim friends and neighbors around the corner, or volunteering at a women's homeless shelter. And so these opportunities would be shared. And this is, again, a good reason why you don't want to wait week to week, because families often are planning much further ahead. Saturday is a Sabbath day, nothing's sent out. Sometimes those weekend events would fall on a Saturday, so Friday would be the Sabbath, but you get the idea. And then Sunday would be that blurb about the service and anything else happening at the congregation. So I'm going to stop sharing and share this more explicit document that'll show you precisely what was sent out. And we'll talk about the vehicle for how this stuff arrived on families' doorsteps in just a moment. So here we go back to kind of our model. We have compassion as our theme. The date was Monday, April 6th, and the activity on Monday is a blessing. And so this was the blessing that would be sent out. Children, don't waste a single second. Serve others, above all the poor, expecting nothing in return. Just as the person who offers flowers is the first to enjoy their fragrance, the person who offers compassion is the first to receive its blessing. Wherever a heart beats with compassion, the holy is there. And that's by Amma. And so as you can see, that very next day, Tuesday, a prayer is sent out to be shared at bedtime, a meditation to be sent out right after school or work, a story, and sometimes I would send links, and so you just click on the link and the story is there. Here we have our faith in action or social activity sent out that Friday, and then Sunday's service blurb. All right, let's go back. And for those of you who are interested, just let me know. You can shoot me an email, ebliss@uua.org, and I'd be happy to share that Google Drive document with you. It's got 2 weeks of examples that you can pull from. All right, let's continue forward. So how do we get this out there? How do we take this this model and get it in parents' hands? Okay. Before we go there, just very quickly, I want to talk about kind of the time aspect. Google is your friend. I could find all this information literally in an hour, hour and a half of work for an entire week. And so with just a little bit of time and investment, a couple hours a week, you can plan this endeavor, this model, and share it with family so that they're engaging with your content, they're engaging with Unitarian Universalism, they're engaging with each other. And at those faith in action events and other social events that you're sharing, engaging between families in ways that they haven't before. And for those of you, again, that try the model, I'll be happy to kind of partner with you as you go through the process. So please keep me abreast of how it goes should you choose to go down this route. And I'd be happy to help problem solve with you if you do reach things, obstacles in terms of time or investment. But let's talk about how do we get it in folks' hands. So social media. This is the part that makes it fun and makes it easy. What we used at First Unitarian was an app. It's a free app called GroupMe. And this icon that you see on your screen is the GroupMe icon. And one thing I'll say is we didn't only use it for Full Week Faith. Our senior high YRUU group, Young Religious Unitarian Universalist, our youth group, used it to communicate all the time about, okay, who's helping lead youth group today and who's got an activity, who's bringing a spiritual practice. All right, we're getting together to go watch blah, 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 play lacrosse. Who's in, and communicating with families similarly. It's a great app. It's something I highly encourage you to use. There's another similar app called Remind, REMIND, that works just the same. And so it's an opt-in text tree app. So you just plug in phone numbers and then you send out your information and it goes to everyone on your tree. And you can create within the app different groupings. So you could do senior high youth. You could do parents. You could do whatever you want. And so our plan after running this prototype, although was to have families opt in as a part of registration. I want to participate in Full Week Faith as an extension of the RE program at First Unitarian Denver. Unfortunately, I received an offer for this position after this test run. And so I'm not sure where the church went, frankly, afterwards, because when you leave a congregational situation, you have to stay away for a year as a professional courtesy. So I'm not really sure where they went with it. But the excitement and energy was really there up until the point where I left. And I have to admit, I feel a little bad that we didn't get to go further with it. But it was tremendous. And it's easy. You type in your little blessing, you type in your little prayer, and out it goes. And it takes literally seconds to send it out. The one drawback of GroupMe, and I haven't personally used Remind, but I've heard it may not have the same issue, is that folks, if they don't use it, will be kicked out of it. And so folks need to be engaging with the material, opening those texts and looking at them. And if not, GroupMe will kick them out and they'll have to re-up to get back in. Another way you could use this is Twitter. Twitter is a fantastic tool. Some people use it very well. Others, like perhaps our president-elect, not so well. but it's a way, if you wanted to do full week faith as an entire congregation and create a Twitter handle specifically for full week faith with your church, you could do that, and folks could then follow that and get your blessing, get your meditation, get your link to the weekend event that's coming up a month out, right? And so Twitter, tweeting these events could be incredibly useful way of not just communicating with specific cohorts within your congregation, but with the entire congregation and beyond your community. Facebook is another way you could use this model of full week faith. You could post your blessings to a parent invite Facebook group, meditation stories. You could even invite your families to upload images or video from the Faith in Action events that you invite them to. Even images of services or little updates or blurbs from you to talk about how the theme impacts aspects of your program. And you can also, one thing that's great about Facebook is that survey function, which is very easy to use. Instead of posting a picture, a photo, or video, you click on that get feedback survey icon, and you create questions and get families' feedback on how full week faith is working out, or what new themes, if you don't have a set schedule in your church, what themes the families are interested in exploring. Lastly, Snapchat and Instagram are also terrific social media tools. Not so much in pushing full week faith ideas, blessings, meditations, but it could be a tremendous way for the people who are participating to share the power of full week faith. And so, say, for example, a photograph of a family sitting around their kitchen table with a chalice lit, sharing that blessing and posting that on Snapchat or Instagram. For those of you who haven't used Snapchat, it can be a photo app, but it's mostly short videos that disappear over time once shared. But it'd be a terrific way to share people as they engage in your program of full week faith. So what does this bring up for you? This is the moment where I invite folks to turn their cameras on, turn off their microphone, or turn their microphones on as well. And what questions do you have about this model of full week faith? Sarah, you are muted. We can't hear you.
Oh, I just said people might not be able to put their cameras on themselves, so I'm going to invite people to do that. And you'll see a little invitation to start your video.
There's Morgan. Hello, Morgan. Any questions from the Davis folks?
So yeah, I think our question was the logistics of, so Eric, you as the DRE did all of this all by yourself?
I did, yep. And like I said, it wasn't that time intensive. I did a lot of Google searches. I used, there's a great website for spiritual practice, spiritual quotes called www.spiritualityandpractice.com. It's a non-denominational site that has different quotes, prayers, practices, blessings, all situated around a theme. I drew from that site quite a bit. But Google was a friend of mine. You know, blessing on divinity, prayer about divinity, meditation on compassion, and you find that stuff really quickly. You start to archive it, and over time, once you build up kind of an arsenal of these activities, and the themes begin to repeat. We were on a 3-year cycle at First Unitarian Denver. you really can get into a flow and a rhythm.
Thank you.
And you posted it every morning on the chosen.
Yeah, I would go into church and have a little reminder in my calendar. All right, blessing for the day, and I'd go to my app, I'd type the blessing in, boom, it's out, and then I move on to the rest of my work.
I'll say, if someone's using Twitter to do this, there are tools like Hootsuite that enable you to schedule Twitter posts in advance. So you could schedule for the whole week. Or if you're using a Facebook page, Facebook organizational pages have features where you can set up your posts to post later. So you could potentially work on it all on Tuesday morning and have it set up for 7 days.
And
I added it. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to say, we had 8 members on our RE team, and when we did our debrief, just the smiles and joy and positive feedback that people would say, I wasn't expecting to get that meditation, and then it showed up in my phone, and I was like, it was the perfect thing. Our family needed that afternoon. It was a stressful day. We sat down, we took a few deep breaths, and we did this meditation together. And we ended up talking about it all over dinner. And the next day, my son talked about how he felt more centered when he was being bullied and just walked away. I mean, story after story after story was coming up from families about how it not only impacted them at home, but also it carried forward throughout the rest of their week.
I put a question in the chat, but I think it's relevant to bring up here, is that Worship Web, back when Eric was doing this, Worship Web was a lot harder to search by theme. It's a collection of resources on uua.org, and one of the projects that I worked on at the UUA was getting all the thousands of entries in Worship Web organized by theme. So you can now write in one of more than 100 spiritual themes and find resources connected to it, meditations, prayers, stories, and Tapestry of Faith programs are also organized around those same themes and tagged with them.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I got our chalice lighting from that precise function.
Great.
And yeah, it wasn't up and running when I was doing this project, and I can only imagine how useful it would be now for those of you who may try and do it. What other questions do you have?
Eric, if I can, it's not so much a question as an anecdote of what I've done, because I'm not very good at the dailiness of what you're describing. And I'm inspired by this to try to get a little better at daily. But for mine, I send out a monthly and a weekly email with all of these things that you're talking about, but people get it at the beginning of a month and then at the beginning of each week.
That's lovely. And however you want to adapt it for your bandwidth. I was a full-time DRE. I recognize that not all DREs are full-time, and so putting it into a chunk where it's going out weekly or monthly, absolutely. Why not? Why not? I mean, the way I would do it is, I'd create that Excel document that you saw, put it all in there, and it would be easy enough just to share that with the families through your email database. You could do that quite easily. The RE team at First Unitarian Denver seemed to like kind of the surprise of it, and it worked. I literally live by my Google Calendar, and so having that little reminder, I would just go in and go, okay, I need to send my meditation, boom. Need to send the link to the story, boom. And it worked for me, but other ways, there's many ways to skin that cat. And for you vegetarians, I apologize for the metaphor.
I think it's not just vegetarians who don't like cats to be skinned. I say as the vegan.
All right, other questions or anecdotes, or what else came up for you? Anything else bubble up?
Hi, I'm curious what you did on Sundays.
you do the full week ministry, and then on Sundays, do you stick with the theme as well?
Indeed, yeah. So Sunday morning, as I mentioned, I would text, as soon as I got into church at 7 a.m., I'd text the blurb about what was going on that day and any additional activities. After today, we're doing our Mystery Pals cookie potluck. But in terms of celebrating theme-based ministry, we did workshop rotation. And so every workshop was dedicated to the theme, exploring the theme. And so we had, for every class, a class format that began with the chalice lighting, the class mantra. We are the church of the open hands and the helping hands and the open heart, and so on. And I just totally annihilated that. But anyway, you get the idea. And then the activities, the spiritual practices, everything that the children and youth engaged in from pre-K all the way to high school was related to the theme. And so that's a whole nother project to get into. But we do spiritual practices, and they were associated into mind, body, and soul practices, all dedicated to the theme, and so on. Does that answer your question, Kate? I hope I got at it.
Yeah, that answered that great. I appreciate it. I think you could probably sort of work on this a little bit. Even if your church isn't doing theme-based ministry, you could still add some more engagement with the families during the week. So it's definitely something for me to sort of ponder and think about.
Yeah, absolutely. This was, Karen's approach was much more in depth. Karen's approach to Full Week Faith was the music director, the administrator, the minister were all participating. It was comprehensive, and I was inspired by the idea of Full Week Faith, engaging families every day, living into our values each day. But the way she had the scope of it felt just immense to me, and trying to get the buy-in from not just my committee, but the other staff. So I invite you to look at the way she created it and kind of went about it. And she has some models. She has some recommended models that really go into depth. And so you could take it a lot further than I did, for sure. Other things that are coming up. We have about 5 more minutes, and so I want to honor your time and honor Sarah's time. Any other questions or things that are burning in your brain at this point?
So I don't have a specific question, but I wanted to say that this information for me opens up a lot of possibilities and opportunities that I'm very excited about. We've been kind of working on this idea of Full Week Faith as a social engagement piece for our church, for our RE team, for a few months. And I really appreciate how manageable your system that you've kind of introduced here seems. Mine was a little bit too big, I think, and this is very workable. Something that's high or forefronted for me, partially as a millennial, is the engagement side of this, and what engagement will look like for our families. And I was wondering if you had anything, or anyone else had anything more to say about how you've seen families engaging and what that kind of looks like, if that makes sense.
Well, I really appreciate the feedback, and I'm glad to hear that this model was well received by at least one of you, and hopefully it will work in your context. In terms of beyond the testimonials that, kind of anecdotal testimonials that I provided earlier, I guess I'm curious to hear more about families engaging. Do you mean how did they use the different prompts that they received each day, or how did they interact with one another around the information. Can you provide a little bit more clarity?
Yeah. So I think I'd probably be more concerned with how they interact with one another, how they were able to use this to connect with other families and with us as a team presenting it.
So because our pilot was really only a month long, the extent to which I saw the conversations happening was limited. But I can say that it happened on a number of occasions where I would walk into church and I would engage with families, and they would come up to me and say, "I really appreciated that story last night," or this. I kid you not, there was a family member saying that one of the prompts they received, I can't remember if it was the prayer or meditation, actually helped their child navigate a tough situation the next day at school. And that to me was like, all right, it's completely worthwhile. All the work is worth it. And so, I wish I had more data for you. I do believe that if a congregation and an RE community commits to this long term, there are a lot of possibilities that will come out of it, and conversations, a deepening of faith, a deepening of connection, especially if it's part of a larger strategy, right? And our strategy again was families are our unit.
And I think, Eric, too, as I think about this, there's a lot of variables in how families could connect with one another through full week faith. And some of it depends on geography. Like I'm imagining a place like Boise might have people who drive for 90 minutes to get to the congregation on a Sunday, and it might be harder to get people together in the middle of the week for a project. So maybe some more of the connection would happen online, and the format that you choose, or actually the platform that you choose for your online engagement, can dictate a lot of how people can relate. Like if it's just a broadcast platform, like sending out texts, then the families don't get a chance to talk with each other. But if it's a Facebook secret group, they can speak to each other confidentially there and upload pictures of their kids doing the little dance and things like that, and engage and build bonds over that platform. So it really depends on the needs of your particular people that you're working with, and the ways that you would connect them with one another.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, and like I mentioned before, the event aspect sent out on Friday, I wasn't giving families enough advance notice. They were receiving it the day of and finding out about an event, and so instead giving them a lot more lead time on things that were coming up. I think integrating that into your approach, if you choose to say, hey, there's this advocacy event, hey, there's this social event, hey, there's this speaker, you are going to get more of that engagement. You're going to get families going, oh, hey, you're here. Wow, we heard about it through Full Week Faith as an extension of the Boise RE program. And so that was the failed aspect of how we approached it. And I think there's some great minds here, and y'all will solve that problem and get those connections happening, both virtually and in person. So, Sarah, we have just a few minutes left. Shall we close it out?
I think I heard someone else starting to say something.
Okay.
It was Morgan.
Okay. All right.
or someone with Morgan.
I'm with Morgan. I'm Ginger. I wanted to ask about how, with the format you used, the technology you used, if you did it as a broadcast, or if you had people interacting with it, posting, and how that worked. If it got too chatty, that there were so many messages that people would miss your message, or if they couldn't reply at all?
That is a terrific question. We set it up so that it wasn't a conversation, that it was simply a one-way push of information. And so people weren't responding other than just kind of re-upping, making sure they were connected to the platform. But I can see good and bad to both approaches, right? I mean, you want people in conversation around these deeper issues. So that's another problem to solve as you get into your pilot or how you approach this.
Mm-hmm.
Great question.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for spending this time with us. We've got just a few more things. First, just want to highlight our resources. For theme-based ministry, I said this website about 8 times, so I won't repeat it. Full Week Faith, if you do want to learn more about Karen's genesis for this entire project, her paper, it's like a 40-page paper is there, as well as a slideshow that talks about her process, and there's lots of resources there. There's an app she created. There's example weeks that she's created, cards that you can, I believe, order from her that go through a couple of aspects of Full Week Faith. The FOS Collaborative, which we talked about, is listed here. And then if you're interested in webinars like this one, you can find out more at this link. And I will be sending this PowerPoint out to you on Monday. My wife and I are taking tomorrow off to March for the inauguration. So I hope you're somewhere safe and warm and with community for tomorrow. This was an engaging, hopefully engaging webinar from the Pacific Western region, but I also produce content in collaboration with the Youth Ministry Roundtable. That's that I to we stuff, right? We used to be isolated congregations and isolated regions and districts, and now we're really starting to live into our theology of interdependence, that we are better together. And so these are some of my colleagues from around the country that are working on aligning youth ministry practices, visions, and policies, and producing content like these webinars. The next one that's coming up is in February. Sarah highlighted it at the beginning. I want to highlight it again. I'll be partnering with my colleague from the Southern region, Natalie Briscoe, and also Abridged Youth, former youth leader from the Mountain Desert District, Larissa Hunt, who currently attends the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. And we'll be exploring inclusive youth group dynamics, including a innovative way to create your youth group's covenant. Sometimes that can get to be a little tedious year in and year out. We've got an interesting tool that you might find beneficial in your youth work. So feel free to join us, and the link for that is down in the bottom. I'm going to close this out with the words of Sarah York, also gotten from that worship web function that Sarah highlighted. We receive fragments of holiness, glimpses of eternity, brief moments of insight. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts that they are, and renewed by their grace, move boldly into the unknown. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a lovely weekend. Be well, and thank you.